Hello and welcome to the Import Export Hub channel. Bogdan here, and guys, skipping the lengthy intro, as I'm sure you all know what to do with the like and the subscribe button. So let's deep dive into this video and try to analyze together the imports and the exports of Mexico, the country of tequila, for 2020. And as usual, I have here the famous and the boring Excel file in which I've added all the relevant information for you. And I will begin with the exports of Mexico. And basically, we see that from 2016 onwards, we have an upward trend up until 2020 when the exports shrunk with more than 9%, bringing the absolute value of Mexico's total exports to more than $418 billion. Relative to the most important chapters driving Mexico's exports, well, we have here chapter 87, so mostly vehicles, as there are quite a lot of auto manufacturers based in Mexico. I don't know, from General Motors, Ford, or VW to Nissan, Mercedes-Benz, and I think that also Hyundai Kia Group has a manufacturing plant in Mexico. So quite a lot of auto manufacturers in Mexico, and for sure this industry is driving much of Mexico's economy. And the figures for 2020 don't lie. We see here more than $100 billion worth of exports. Another big driver is Chapter 84, Machinery and Mechanical Appliances, with more than $75 billion worth of exports. And the third most important chapter driving Mexico's exports is Chapter 85, so Electrical Machinery, with close to $75 billion worth of exports. As for the year-on-year changes, if we look closely together, the chapters involving durable goods like cars, appliances, or machinery, and discretionary goods like electronics are all in red, while basic goods like vegetables or beverages and luxury goods all experienced positive changes, as basic goods and luxury goods are more resilient and therefore less affected in times of crisis than durable or discretionary goods. So anyways, I think you get the idea here. I don't want to make this video too long, and I'll move on to the imports of Mexico for 2020. And we see that this amounted to more than $383 billion, with Chapter 85 driving most of Mexico's imports with close to $83 billion. On the second place, we have Chapter 84 with close to $66 billion, having a share in Mexico's imports of 17%. And the third most important driver is Chapter 87 with $32 billion worth of imports, down 25% compared with 2019, and 8% share in Mexico's total imports. As for the year-on-year changes, limiting this analysis, if you want, to the top 10 import drivers, we see a lot of red here, ranging from, I don't know, minus 3% as in the case with Chapter 90 to minus 38% as in the case with Chapter 27, for example. As for the balance of trade, well, Mexico is doing pretty well, if you ask me, with close to $35 billion positive balance of trade. And we see here together who are the main drivers of this positive trade balance. So basically we have Chapter 84, Chapter 87, and Chapter 90, this last one with close to $2.9 billion positive trade balance. And guys, with the exports and the imports of Mexico being covered briefly, I think I can go and move on to my next section, in which I will take the top 5 best performing chapters from each flow, and we will see together who are the countries from which Mexico is importing, or to which countries Mexico is exporting. And with this being said, let's start with the top performer chapter driving Mexico's exports, which is Chapter 87, and we see here that the total exports accounted for more than $100 billion, with United States, Germany, and Canada being the top 3 destinations. But we have also China, Brazil, Colombia, Japan, Australia, or Italy, also with important figures, just to cover the top 10 ones. As for the year-on-year changes, overall the exports shrunk with 17%. We see a lot of red here, with the United States having the biggest absolute decrease. On the other hand, the exports towards South Korea, we see together, grew with 150%, bringing the total exports towards South Korea to more than $853 million. As for the main drivers, it's not surprising here that cars are driving most of Mexico's exports from this chapter towards both the United States and Australia. Now, moving on to my the second biggest chapter driving Mexico's exports, which is chapter 84, with close to $17.5 billion worth of exports cumulatively. And we see here that the United States, Canada, and Germany are the top three export destinations, but we have also countries like, I don't know, China, Brazil, the Netherlands, or Spain, to whom the exports performed well, again, just covering the top 10 destinations. Relative to the year-on-year changes, overall the exports shrunk with 6%, with the United States being again the country to which the absolute value decreased the most. We see that also the exports towards Canada shrunk quite a lot, but there are three destinations to which the exports grew, and these are China, South Korea, and the Netherlands, who in 2020 imported with 9, 26, and 5% more, respectively, than what they've imported in 2019. As for the main drivers, we have HS code 840734, so spark ignition piston engines, driving most of Mexico's exports towards the United States, and machinery and apparatus for filtering or purifying gases, driving most of Mexico's exports towards Canada. Now, moving on to the third most important export chapter for Mexico, so chapter 85. Electrical machinery and parts. We see that in terms of export destinations, the United States is again the first one, followed by Canada, and we have on the third place the Netherlands. In terms of year-on-year changes, overall the exports shrunk with 6%, and again we see a lot of red, ranging from minus 3% as in the case with the Netherlands to minus 26% as in the case with France, for example. In this top 10 list, there are also two countries to which the exports grew, and these are China and Hong Kong, who imported with 32 and 28% respectively more than in 2019. While in terms of the main drivers from this chapter, we have HS code 851762 driving most of Mexico's exports towards the Netherlands, and HS code 851220 driving most of Mexico's exports towards Brazil. So anyways, moving on to my next chapter, which is chapter 90, we see that overall the exports amounted to more than $18.5 billion, again with the United States, China, and Ireland being the top three export destinations. But we have also Germany, Canada, the United Kingdom, or Brazil, to whom the exports were strong also, again limiting this analysis, if you want, to the top 10 destinations. Relative to the year-on-year changes, on aggregate, the market shrunk with 6%, but there are some markets to whom Mexico's exports grew compared with 2019. And these are China, France, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom, again limiting myself only to the top 10 destinations. As for the main drivers here for this chapter, we have HS code 900110 driving Mexico's exports towards Ireland, and HS code 902620 driving Mexico's exports towards Canada. And finally, guys, moving on to my last chapter for the export flow, which is chapter 27, so mineral fuels and mineral oils. We see that overall the market shrunk with 33% compared with the figures from 2019, with the US territories driving most of Mexico's exports, followed by Taiwan, and we have on the third place other European territories. In terms of year-on-year changes, we see a lot of red, ranging from minus 12% as in the case with the United States to minus 95% as in the case with the Netherlands. But we have one country to whom the exports from this chapter grew, and that's Panama, who basically imported 55% more in 2020 compared with 2019. Relative to the export drivers, both for Panama and Belize, HS code 271019, so medium oils and preparations of petroleum minerals drove most of Mexico's exports towards them. And guys, with the last chapter being covered from the export flow, I will move on to the import one, and I will begin with the most important chapter in terms of imported value, which is chapter 85. And we see here that Mexico's imports in 2020 totaled almost $83 billion, 13% less than the figures from 2019, with China, the United States, and Malaysia representing the top three supplying markets. But we have also Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, Thailand, or the Philippines, again, covering the top 10 trading partners. In terms of year-on-year changes, again, a lot of red, ranging from minus 6 to minus 25%, with Vietnam being the only supplying country that had its exports towards Mexico increase with 8% compared with 2019. As for the import drivers, we have HS code 853890 as in the case with the United States, and HS code 854231, so electronic integrated circuits as processors and controllers, as in the case with Vietnam. Jumping on to the second most important chapter driving Mexico's imports for 2020, which is chapter 84, we see that the total imports accounted for roughly $66 billion, 14% less than in 2019, with the United States, China, and South Korea representing the top three supplying markets. But there are other important ones like, I don't know, Germany, Thailand, Italy, or Canada. Again, limiting this analysis, if you want, only to the top 10 destinations or origins in this case. In terms of year-on-year changes, we see a lot of red in relation with the United States, China, Germany, Japan, Italy, Canada, and the Philippines. And we have two countries from which Mexico imported more, and these are South Korea with 18% increase and Taiwan with 15% increase. In terms of import drivers, for South Korea we have parts and accessories of automatic data processing machines and mechanical appliances not elsewhere specified, driving most of Mexico's imports from Italy. And guys, with this chapter being covered, I'll jump on to the next chapter, which is chapter 87. And again, we see a lot of red here, at least for the top 10 partners, and of course for the total imports in general, who shrunk 25% compared with 2019, which is quite a big contraction if you ask me, bringing the absolute figures to more or less $32 billion. Relative to the biggest trading partners, the top three ones are the United States, China, and Japan, who saw their exports towards Mexico decrease with 23, 25, and 20% respectively. But there are other countries who saw their exports getting lower as well, and we have Italy, Germany, or Thailand, just to name a few. In terms of the main import drivers, both for Japan and India, the largest imported HS code was 870323, which is basically cars. And with this being said, I will move on to my last chapter, which is chapter 27. And again, we see a lot of red, except maybe with the Netherlands, who saw their exports towards Mexico increase with 8% compared with the figures of 2019. And we see that overall, the imports accounted for $25 billion, which is 39% less than in 2019, with the United States, the Netherlands, and China being the top three suppliers for Mexico. As for the import drivers, there's not too much product complexity here if you want, and we see that HS code 271012 is driving most of Mexico's imports, both from the Netherlands and Belgium. And guys, with this being said, I think I can draw a couple of conclusions here, so bear with me up until the end. The first one, from a macroeconomic point of view, if you want, Mexico with the 11th largest economy in the world, oriented mostly on the manufacturing sector, is a very, very important actor in the international trading scene, and the figures presented previously here speak for themselves. My second conclusion, well, being part of USMCA or NAFTA, however you want to call it, Mexico is a very, very important manufacturing location and export market destination both for the United States and Canada. For the United States, both in terms of imports and exports. As for Canada, well, Mexico is not that important in terms of Canada's total exports towards Mexico, but nonetheless, it is important. My third conclusion, again, relative to the USMCA free trade agreement, Mexico, from my point of view, has a strong export market concentration towards the United States. We are speaking about 80% of Mexico's total exports, which is very, very concentrated. And in order to keep things going, I think that both the United States and Mexico have to be somehow aligned, not only at the trading level, if you want, but also on the political one, as these two go hand in hand. And here, unfortunately, the political doesn't have all the time the same priorities as the corporate or the private sector. And basically, when this is happening, trade is suffering. Again, this is my opinion. But anyways, moving on to, I think, is my fourth conclusion, which relates to all these long and complex supply chains, and even more importantly, with the recent supply chain disruptions. And of course, let's not forget about the huge freights. I think that a lot of companies from the United States, and why not Canada, will consider nearshoring to Mexico some of the manufacturing activities from Asia, especially the ones involving the apparel sector. So I don't know, if both the public and private sectors from Mexico play this card right, we might see some increased nearshoring activities in Mexico in the near future. And the fifth and the last conclusion is related to the intra-chapter trading for both the imports and exports of Mexico, which for me is a sign that Mexico's economy is on the right path to become even more competitive in the international trading scene, both in terms of imports and exports. And guys, with this being said, my time is up. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe buttons. And of course, until next time, keep your business safe. Thanks.